In part 1 of this series, we downloaded the Softimage XSI add-on for Crytek and we put it into our Softimage add-ons directory. And you may need to go to File, Add-on Install, and navigate to that directory, Add-ons, and select this file, hit OK and install it. And once you restart XSI Mod Tool, you should have a menu up here for your Crytek exporter. We're going to use a simple house model in this tutorial, but if you don't know how to model yet, I'll show you how to make a crate and you can follow the tutorial just the same. So under Model, make sure you go to Get Primitive Polygon Mesh Cube, and 1 unit in Mod Tool equals 10 decimeters in Cryengine 3, and that might sound weird, but you'll find it works just fine. So if you want a 3 foot by 3 foot cube, 1 unit or 10 decimeters will work fine. Hit Enter, and you can hold S and right click to rotate, click to pan, and you can use your mouse scroll or middle click while holding S to zoom in and out. And if you want to get a better shaded view, you can go to wireframe and go ahead and hit textured, because we'll texture this later. With your object selected, you can hit V to move it, you can hit C to rotate it, and you can hit X to scale it. And space will always take you back to object selection. So we have our object selected, and you can hit U to select certain faces. So if we wanted to select the bottom, hit V, we'll move just the bottom. And I have snapping set on, so it's going to snap to my grids. And if you want to adjust those settings, you can go to Transform Preferences, Increments, and this is going to affect while you're translating or moving, while you're rotating every 15 degrees, and while you're scaling. So when I have these set to 0.25, I can move these faces every fourth of a unit, so that way I can fine tune a little better. Now I'll readjust it so that it's 1 unit by 1 unit, and let's go ahead and save this as crate 1. And I'm going to open up house 1, and you can follow along with your crate if you like. So I've opened my house, and it's built from 2 very simple cubes. You should be able to figure out how to do this quickly. One on the inside, I've inverted the normals so that the textures will be facing inside, and then we have our outside cube, and I'm going to hold Control to select both and go to Polymesh, Merge, and that's going to create one object in my Scene Explorer I can see that is the inside and the outside combined. So go to the Crytek menu, create Cryexport node, name it House 01, and now under our scene you can see that we have a House 01 Cryexport node, and any objects that we want to extract with our model are going to need to go in here. You can see right now Polymesh is not in there, so if you hit 8 you'll go to your scene root, and if by default it doesn't go to the scene, click here and simply drag Polymesh into the House 01 Cryexport node. Let's select these cubes we're not using anymore and press H to hide them, so we only have our Polymesh selectable. And now we're going to add the material, and we want to use the same material in Mod Tool that we use in Cryengine. So let's open, I've downloaded this wood texture from cgtextures.com. Make sure it's tiled, and make sure that the image size is 512 by 512. And I'm going to save it using the Crytek exporter. And diffuse High Q for high quality is the preset that we're going to want to use. And now we're going to want to open the editor so that we can turn this Crytek into a DDS, which the editor does automatically for us. So with the editor open, DDS files will be generated for us automatically. Let's navigate to our Cryengine 3 game folder, and we'll make a new folder called Objects to be read alongside objects.pack. And within objects we'll make a House 01 folder, and now that if we drag our wood texture in here, you can see the DDS file will be auto generated for us. But since this texture is going to be used to texture House 01, we're going to rename it house01.dds, that way the editor doesn't get confused. And now let's go back into Softimage mod tool, and we're going to go to, make sure you're in the render category by hitting 3, and we're going to go to modify materials, and we can just use this default one, And here next to color there's a plug that's going to basically determine what's drawn onto the image. We'll hit that plug, go to image, and we want a new from file, and let's navigate to within our Cryengine. I'm going to need to go to Cryengine 3, Game, Objects. In our house folder, we have our house 1 DDS, same texture that the engine's going to use. So we'll select that. You can now see our house, and for me that texture showed up automatically. For you it's not going to. You're going to want to drag this texture onto your object, and it's still probably not going to show up. You need to exit this and you need to apply some UV mapping, and you do that by going to Get, Property, Texture Projection, and we could do Unique UVs, Polymesh, and hit exit, and by now your texture should show up here. And you can modify the UV mapping by going to View, Rendering, Texturing, and select the texture editor, or by hitting Alt-7. And this is where you modify your UVs, and we'll get into editing these UV maps in a different tutorial. Now let's go back to our materials and make sure that the name of the material is the same as what we're going to be texturing. So I'll name it House 1 so the editor doesn't get confused. I'll go ahead and rename this also to House 1. Alright, now there should be no confusion. And one last thing, we need to apply physics to our model so that our player can't just run right through it. So let's go to the materials, double click the material we're using, and for the physics, select a physical proxy. Normally you would create a separate material for your proxy, but since this is such a simple model, it'll work fine. And uncheck enable transparency, because like I said, this is not a separate physics transparent proxy. And now we just need to convert that material to a Crytek Cry shader. So hit 8 to go to your Explorer, hit M to go to the materials, and select, this is the default, the House 1 material that we just made. Go to Crytek, convert selected materials to Cry shader, and that'll do it. Your material and model should be ready to go to the engine. In order to export, we're going to make sure our exporter is set up properly, so go to Crytek Cry Properties, and the bin32 path needs to be set to the older Crysis SDK where we found this XSI add-on. So I used Crysis Wars, and the bin32 folder is where the RC is located. So go ahead and select that bin32, and the export path is going to be the newer Cryengine 3, and we created within our games folder and objects folder. In the house folder, it's going to export your model right there. And now you can go to Crytek Export All and Crytek Export All Materials, and now in your Cryengine, in your house folder, everything for this model is ready to go in the engine. So now back to the engine, and in the Objects tab under Geom Entity, you'll see all the models that you have in the game, and you'll see our house folder right alongside the rest. There's our house, and you can see it's already textured. Everything in the Cryengine happens very automatically, which I like. And you can hit Control G to pop in the game and see that our physics is working and everything's sized accordingly, but it says no surface type when you shoot it, and that's simple. Hit Escape M to get to materials, and not the materials but the objects. You'll see the house folder, and there's the material we're using. Simply change the surface type, and there's already a wood surface type. So now when we shoot the model, you can see it's wood. And so obviously you're going to want to do some proper UV mapping so that your textures look good. But there you have simple models from XSI Mod Tool, and I hope you enjoyed the tutorial.